Well, seemingly out of nowhere, we have another new class released for D&D. This time, it's the Psion. This is not the first time that Wizards of the Coast has made an attempt at making a Psionic main class in 5th edition. Those who've been around for a while may remember the UA Mystic, which was definitely a thing to behold. Well, it looks like they've learned from some of those mistakes, and they're back with another UA class. So let's take a look at the Psion and see how it stacks up. A couple of side notes, there is actually a ton to cover in this UA document, so rather than having a ridiculous hour-plus video, this one will be split up into a few parts. This video will cover the main class and the Psionic Disciplines, the second video will cover the subclasses, and a third will cover the wild talents and the new spells. Also, credit where it's due, I want to commend WotC for continuing to pump out UA content at such a consistent rate, and it's not just tiny stuff either. We're getting classes and subclasses, spells and feats, it's a lot, so I will give them a shout out for that. Starting off with our core traits, we see that our primary ability is Intelligence. It's also worth noting, if you hadn't guessed already, that the Psion is a full caster, which makes this now our third intelligence-based class if you count the Artificer. It's kind of funny how for so long we only had the Wizard, and then the two back-to-back UAs we get involve intelligence-based classes. Yes, I know the Artificer was also around in the 2014 era as well. Next, our hit die. As you would expect, it's a d6, matching that of the Wizard and the Sorcerer. Combined with the fact that we get no armor proficiencies, we are definitely looking like we're going to be on the squishier side. This is especially interesting since, as you'll see, we also have some abilities that interact with our pool of hit dice. We also get proficiency in 2 of Arcana, Insight, Intimidation, Investigation, Medicine, Perception, and Persuasion, as well as with simple weapons. Overall, there's nothing particularly crazy here or unexpected. Looking at our class progression table, you'll notice a few things. Firstly, as mentioned, we are a full caster. Secondly, you'll see 2 columns, one labeled energy dice and the other number of dice. Our energy dice are how we fuel our power and our psionic abilities. They begin as a d6, scale to a d8 at level 5, a d10 at level 11, and a d12 at level 17. And the amount that we have available to us also increases as we level, starting at 4 and going up to 12. My first thought on that is that I wonder if the amount of dice should have been more of a consistent gradual increase rather than a jump of 2 at every 4 levels, as we do have plenty of ways to use our psionic abilities. But on the flip side, we're also a full caster, so there's already quite a lot to manage, so I can see why they would want to keep the amount of dice relatively constrained. Starting off at level 1, we get our spellcasting feature, which is nearly the same as most others in the game, except for this portion at the bottom entitled Psionic Spellcasting. This allows us, when we cast one of our Psion spells, to not have to use verbal or material components unless that material component is consumed or has a gold cost specified in the spell. This is already subtly shifting even the way that we cast spells and making our typical casting feel even psionic in nature. It's cool flavor and I'm totally here for it. The one thing to note is that it is kinda stepping on the toes of Sorcerer's subtle spell metamagic. In one way, it's better since this is free and applies to all Psion spells all the time, but at the same time, Subtle Spell also eliminates somatic components, so there is a bit of a trade in either direction. Regardless, I do feel like some Sorcerer players will at least be kind of annoyed by this. Speaking of Subtle Spell, also at level 1 we get Subtle Telekinesis, which provides us with the Mage Hand cantrip. However, when we cast it, we can also do so without using somatic components, and we can also make it invisible. This is really cool and very flavorful and creates a lot of opportunities to pick pockets or execute some invisible atomic wedgies. Finally, and also starting at level 1, we get our Psionic Power feature. This gives us the first uses for our energy dice, which we can recover 1 when we finish a short rest, and we get all of them back when we complete a long rest. The first 2 features we get are Telekinetic Propel and Telepathic Connection. Telekinetic Propel allows us as a bonus action to select a large or smaller creature within 30 feet of us and roll one of our energy dice. Then the target is subjected to a strength saving throw. On a failed save, they are pushed or pulled an amount of feet equal to 5 times the number rolled on the die. This is interesting since it already outclasses the telekinetic shove portion of the telekinetic feat, which is only accessible from level 4 and beyond, but again, obviously you get some more stuff with it. The other thing that is cool about it though, is that it allows you to push or pull your target. As someone who spent way too much time trying to make a push and pull build for my Circle of the Sea Druid, I can tell you that there are precious few ways to pull effectively in 2024 D&D, but this is one. Now, there is a lot of embedded randomness in it. It's a minimum of 5 feet to a maximum of 30 feet, so you kinda need to be okay with the inconsistency. It's also reliant on a failed saving throw. However, something that softens the blow, especially since strength is not a great save to target, is the fact that our energy dice is not lost if the target succeeds on their save. That makes this feel much more usable. There's obviously tons of force movement applications that you can do with this, including in combination with other party members, which can always make for a great time, whether it's shoving someone off a cliff or into a spike growth or anything else of that nature. Then there's telepathic connection, and yeah, the base 5-foot range isn't all that great. It's like, hey, I can read your mind if I'm standing uncomfortably close to you. But if we roll our energy die, we can increase the range of our telepathy by a number of feet equal to 10 times the number rolled. It's worth noting that it's increasing by and not increasing to, so you do always get to add that base 5 feet. So at level 1, this means it can be anything from 15 to 65 feet. Again, there is a lot of inherent randomness involved here, which can make it a tough pill to swallow. At least the low end of 15 feet isn't completely useless, but it does make it more challenging to use if you had a particular use case in mind for it. On the bright side, it does naturally scale with your Psion level, increasing the duration by 1 minute for each level in the class. Overall, I think the options provided by Psionic Power are both reasonably compelling, but I can definitely see how the inconsistency could get a bit frustrating. At the same time though, I think there's also a fairly solid balance reason for why there is so much inherent randomness. In any case, these are far from our only psionic abilities. Starting from level 2, we get another feature, Psionic Discipline. Just on naming, I'll say your Psionic Discipline sounds like it would have been our subclass, but it's not. They're just more psionic powers. Not to be confused with the psionic powers that we got from our Psionic Powers feature at level 1. Anyway, when we unlock our Psionic Discipline feature, we get our choice of 2 disciplines which are fueled by our energy dice. We can only use 1 discipline per turn and only once on a turn unless it is otherwise specifically noted. Whenever we get a Psion level, we can replace one option with a different one. Additionally, we gain access to 2 new disciplines at level 10, and then an additional 2 at level 17 for a total of 6 disciplines throughout our career. Before we get into the rest of the class, let's take a look at all of the different psionic disciplines available to us, because there are quite a few to choose from. First is Biofeedback. This lets us, when we cast a Psion spell of the Necromancy or Transmutation school, to expand an energy die. We then gain an amount of temporary hit points equal to the number rolled, plus our intelligence modifier. This is okay. It's likely that at level 2, when we can initially take this, we'll likely be getting an average of like 6 or 7, which is probably close to 50% of our hit point max at the time. It also allows for a form of healing without hit dice, which will be relevant to the class. Next is Destructive Thoughts. With this one, when we cast a Psion spell from the Conjuration or Evocation schools, and a creature we can see succeeds on a saving throw against the spell, we can spend 1 energy die. The creature then takes psychic damage equal to the number rolled plus our intelligence modifier. The idea of this sounds very cool, but the reality doesn't quite live up to that. The only low-level spell that this even works on is Shatter, and that's still a level 2 spell. Other than that, you're waiting until you have 6th level spells, and then you can use it with Blade Barrier. Again, this is such a cool concept, and it feels so on brand that even if someone saves against your spells, they're still taking this psionic damage, but they would really need way more spells to be able to effectively support this. Give them something like Thunderclap or Hellish Rebuke, and then maybe we can talk. Next up, we get Devilish Tongues, which allows us to roll 1 of our energy dice and add it to our total when we take the influence action. This feels distinctly psionic to me, and it's very cool. There's nothing particularly flashy going on here, but it's a good effect and seems like a fun one too. I really like it. Ego Whip allows us, when a creature would provoke an opportunity attack, to use our reaction to roll 1 of our energy dice. When we do, we subject the target to an intelligence saving throw. On a failed save, they have their speed reduced by 10 feet, and they subtract the number that we rolled on our dice from their next damage roll that they make before the end of their next turn. There's a few moving parts here which complicate the question of whether this is good or not. Firstly, I'm not confident how often you'll be at least intentionally within melee range and having the opportunity attacks triggered against you. Granted, one of these subclasses is a bit more glitchy, so this probably leans a little bit more towards that. Regardless, combine that with the fact that 5e doesn't feature tons of movement. It does target an intelligence save, which is great, but then it only impacts the next damage roll that the creature makes before the end of their next turn, which might not happen for any number of reasons, including another party member killing the thing, or they missed their attack roll, or you saved on the spell, or they're taking another action, or they're under the effect of another status condition, or any number of other things. Again, this is a good concept, but it feels very build dependent and generally too situational, but I don't think it's necessarily bad. Expanded Awareness allows us to roll 1 of our energy dice and add it to our total when we take the search action. While it doesn't feel as distinctly psionic and cool to me as Devilish Tongues, I can still see it. Perception and insight checks, hey, I said the thing, are both quite common, so this feels like a reasonable pick too, but again, it's not exciting in any real way. Next is Id Insinuation, which allows us when we cast a Psion spell from the enchantment or illusion school of magic that forces a creature to make a saving throw to expend 2 of our energy dice. However, we only get to roll 1 of them. The number rolled is subtracted from one of the target's saving throws. This one has a way better subset of spells that it works with, including Command, Charm Person, Dissonant Whispers, Hold Person, Phantasmal Force, Hypnotic Pattern, and so many more. The thing about Id Insinuation though, is that it's expensive. You're spending 2 dice to only get to roll 1, so in that sense, it's not a great deal. But on the other hand, the effect here is incredibly strong, so it's probably still worth taking. However, and I'll contradict myself immediately, Bane, which sadly we don't have access to as a Psion, is probably better on average since it can hit multiple targets and works for any spell, but it does require concentration and a spell slot and is a d4. Either way, if you have a party member with Bane, that'll be great, but if you don't, this can still be a great option. Next is Inerrant Aim, which allows us when we miss with an attack roll to roll an energy dice and add it to our total, potentially turning that miss into a hit. Conveniently, the die is only expended if we end up hitting, which makes this a very low risk, high reward option and certainly worth considering. Again, not dissimilar to Bless affecting the party, but Inerrant Aim potentially costs nothing if it doesn't end up working rather than a spell slot regardless, so there is that. Psionic Backlash is probably the reason that we don't have Hellish Rebuke on our spell list. This one lets us, when a creature hits us with an attack roll, to use our reaction to expend 1 energy die to roll 2. So we have the opposite deal compared to Id Insinuation. When we use it, we roll our 2 energy dice and subtract the value on each die from the total of the attack roll that was made against us, to potentially turn it into a miss. In addition, we can also force that target to make a wisdom saving throw. On a failed save, they take psychic damage equal to the amount rolled on both energy die. Truthfully, I'm not sure why this is coming in at a discounted rate. Maybe it's because it also requires us to spend a reaction. If I had to actually guess though, I think it's probably just a mistake and is just a combination of different versions that they were working on. This is probably supposed to cost 2 dice, but hey, maybe I'm wrong. Either way, I think this is a good option as well. Potentially turning a hit into a miss and causing some damage is not bad at all. It does add a few hoops to the process, but it's good. Psionic Guards allows us to spend 1 of our energy dice at the start of our turn to have immunity to the charmed and frightened conditions, and it gives us advantage on intelligence saving throws. Additionally, if we are already under the effect of one of those conditions, we end them. We don't just suspend them. Psionic Guards also does not preclude us from using another discipline on this same turn, which is a nice touch. This feels situational. Yes, charmed and frightened are fairly commonly imposed conditions, but even then, there's a lot of ways to end them, though this is likely the cheapest. Advantage on intelligence saves is almost inconsequential. There's so few spells that target intelligence saves, but some creatures, like the Mind Flayer, do have incredibly strong abilities that are tied to them. So it's one of those things where it's like, if you know what you're going up against, this can be the god pick, and it will bail you out massively. But I think like 80% of the time, it's just going to end up being dead weight, and since you only get a total of 6 of these by level 17, I think it'll be hard to find the slot for this unless you really know what you're facing. To continue our trend of stepping on the sorcerer's toes, we also get Swift Precognition. This allows us when we cast a Psion spell from the Abjuration or Divination schools with a casting time of 1 action to change the casting time to a bonus action. The number of dice we have to spend to do this equals the level of the spell. It is worth noting here that this would imply that using it with cantrips is free and it does not state otherwise, and funnily enough, that probably ends up being the best use of this for a long time since it works with either Blade Ward or True Strike. Now, my guess is that even for cantrips, it would still cost 1, but maybe I'm mistaken, and we can see if there ends up being a clarification on that. Whether this is good or not, again, depends on the spells in the available pool. The thing about most divination spells, though, is that you're far less likely to cast them during combat, which is when the casting time would really come into play. Some, like Mind Spike, are useful in combat, but in general, things like Comprehend Languages, Detect Magic, and Speak with Animals aren't things you're busting out mid-fight. Some abjuration spells you totally could, like the aforementioned Blade Ward, but others, like Mage Armor, you probably cast at the beginning of the day. This can be great with Banishment, depending on what else you had to do with it, but it does get expensive at that point, since by the time that you get access to Banishment when you're 7th level, you only have 6 energy dice available to you, so burning 4 of them at once feels like a very steep cost. I think this one is situationally okay if they adjust the spell list or if you really like Blade Ward and True Strike. And finally, we have Tactical Mind, which allows us when we take the study action to spend 1 of our energy dice and add it to the number rolled on the check. Side note, there is also a fighter feature also called Tactical Mind. I really don't like when two features that do completely different things share a name, so I would highly recommend that they come up with a new one for this one. As to whether it's good or not, it's fine. Like the others, I think there's a strong case to be made for any of these ones. Overall, I think the Psionic disciplines are a bit of a mixed bag. Some are generally good, some are too situational, some are expensive, others have good ideas, but the pool of spells that they're attached to don't really mesh well with their desired effect. I get why these are so challenging, because they're kind of balancing them on a knife's edge. It can be incredibly easy to make one of these so overpowered that there is no choice anymore, but any small change in the opposite direction makes them feel so weak by comparison. I obviously have not had the opportunity to play with the Psion yet, since this thing is like 4 hours old at this point that I'm writing it, but this is what I will be looking for when I do get the chance. Right now, I feel like some of these need tweaks to feel worth picking. Another potential option to explore for these is to gate some of them behind a higher level to prevent the more high power options from being available too early and to protect the balance rather than just making them all kind of weaker. Okay, that was a lot. Back to leveling because we're actually not even close to done yet. Also at level 2, because there wasn't enough, we get our Psionic Modes. Twice per long rest, as a bonus action, we can opt to transform ourselves into one of two modes for 1 minute. Attack mode or defense mode. This made me think of Crocs and going into sport mode and I started laughing like an idiot, I'm sorry. Anyway, attack mode allows damage from our weapon attacks and Psion spells to ignore resistance to psychic damage. And when we roll damage on one of our Psion spells, we can expend an energy die to re-roll a number of damage dice up to our intelligence modifier, though we must use the new rolls. Re-rolling damage is nice, though you'd likely only use it on total whiffs, but it's likely enough to bump your average damage rolls up by a few points. Bypassing psychic resistance is nice and flavorful, but it's not particularly impactful, as in the new monster manual, there are a total of 12 creatures with resistance to it. Obviously, if you expand it out to all pre-2024 creatures, you get more, but still it's only like 100 out of the close to 3,000, so it's still a tiny proportion. Defense mode gives us resistance to psychic damage, and when we fail an intelligence, wisdom, or charisma saving throw, we get to use our reaction to expend an energy die. We get to roll it and add it to the total from our save, potentially turning it into a success. Between the two, I would say that on average, defense mode feels better. Even though you can't rely on being subjected to certain saving throws, wisdom saves are pretty common, and psychic damage is far more common to experience than it is resisted. Next up at level 5, we get Psionic Restoration. This lets us, when we finish a short rest, instead of recovering just one energy die, we can recover a number of dice equal to half our number of energy dice rounded down, and we can only do this once per long rest. This is kind of like our Arcane Recovery or Font of Inspiration. It's a pretty common feature among casters to be able to regain their additional resources, so it's nice to see it here and will certainly help give our Psion a little bit more staying power. At level 7, we get Psionic Surge, which lets us, when we roll initiative, to regain one use of our Psionic modes. Fortunately, unlike what we've seen in the past, this does not require that we have no uses left, and is not capped at once per day, which basically means that we can always have one available when we enter combat, which is great. On top of that though, it also lets us, whenever we use one or more of our energy dice, to expend one of our hit dice to treat a roll of 1, 2, or 3 on those energy dice as a 4. This is a solid buff to the efficiency of our energy dice, but does come at the expense of some potential healing. I think this actually makes for a very interesting balance, but also feels closer to blood magic to some extent, though obviously it's not directly harming us, just the potential for healing. The bigger issue that I see here is that it's yet another resource when we already have spell slots, energy dice, discipline, modes, and now hit dice. It's just a lot. Yes, hit dice have always been a resource, but they're generally pretty static and seldom interacted with outside of short rest and a few niche abilities and items. This makes it more core to the class and adds an additional layer of decision making and complexity. I don't know that it's bad per se, I'm just sort of mixed on it and kind of bringing it up. Speaking of that though, our level 20 capstone, Enkindled Lifeforce, interacts with hit dice even more. It allows us, once per turn, when we roll one of our energy dice for one of our Psion features or our disciplines, to spend 2 hit dice to roll 2 additional energy dice and add them to the roll. Honestly, this is a cool feature that really feels like it lets you kind of overpower or over-channel your abilities to some extent. By the time you're level 20, you have plenty of hit dice to use, most of which you were never going to be spending anyway, and this gives you the opportunity to use them in some capacity. I think this is a very cool feature, but I'm just not sure that any of the disciplines support it quite yet. Psionic Backlash gets us a bit of extra damage, sure, Biofeedback can even give us some extra temporary hit points, effectively trading future potential hit points in the form of hit dice for usable temporary hit points right now, which is sweet. But others like Inerrant Aim, I mean, once we hit, do we really need to add 2 more d12s to our attack dice? Or I suppose it could be cool for one of the ability check ones to let you potentially get into the absurd territory and hit like a 50 on perception for no other reason than because you can. Ultimately, I think the Psion is a very interesting class and is a far better take on the theme than what we saw with the Mystic. However, I do feel that the complexity or difficulty of the class is a lot higher than pretty much anything we saw in the player's handbook, and that was also kind of the case for the Artificer too. The thing is, the nature of these kinds of classes do lean that way. It's also surely no coincidence that the intelligence-based classes just end up with a whole lot of things to do and to manage as befits their mental capacity. This is also surely why they didn't end up in the PHB, since they can definitely be overwhelming to certain players and also just may not fit the theme of many campaigns. I like this version of the class, but I do think it could use another pass on some of the disciplines to make sure they're delivering fully on the fantasy. Let me know what you think about the Psion in the comments, check out some of my other videos, but otherwise, take care.